Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. The international break is over and it's FA Cup quarter-final time. I'm your host, Greg Oram, along with my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, it's Richard Spray.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit.
Now Forest can break again. It's 4 against 4, and it's Gibbs-White. Nobody's closing him down, and he's getting Elanga in.
Yes!
Brilliant from Morga Gibbs-White. And a and Forest are stretching it, switch again, 3 against 3. Elanga into the penalty area. Shoots
Yes!
the corner, 2-0. Anthony Elanga scores for Forest.
Way down in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, way back up in the woods along the Everglades. Stood a log cabin made of earth and wood. We lived a country boy named Johnny Good. Never ever learned to read or write so well. He could play a guitar just like he's ringing a bell.
He sends it forward to Elanga. Elanga forward for Wood. Inside left channel, great shot! Forest are ahead! It's Chris Wood! The first time they've remotely threatened the Liverpool penalty area!
Is a curious thing. Make a one-man weep.
Tries to thread it through for Jota. Anderson wins it again off Cash into the penalty area. Hits the line.
Yes!
It's Elanga! Elanga scores his first goal of the season, and Forest have turned it right round.
Just wanted to pick out some of my favourite goals so far from this season to integrate them with the Back to the Future theme that you've been waiting for, Richard Spray. How are you this morning?
Oh, fantastic. Couldn't be anything but great after that. That was amazing. Well done.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. Let's crack on. It's true that all Forest fans want their players to feature on international break and do well whilst they're away with their countries, but at the same time, feeling quite perfectly content if they hardly get a kick at all and stay out of the way of potential injuries. It's a double-edged sword, and whilst Morga Gibbs-White will be feeling disappointed at 0 minutes for England, Reds fans will be breathing a sigh of relief, especially as 18-goal centre-forward Chris Wood has picked up a hip and rib issue playing for New Zealand that is likely to rule him out for at least a couple of games. Forest are back on Saturday with the 5:15 kickoff away at Brighton in the FA Cup, and as the last couple of months of football are upon us, and with plenty still to play for, will the Reds now need to turn to their squad options a little more than planned in order to get over the line? Here with us to chat FA Cup, injuries, signings and more, we have the stat man Danscape and Raf, the random Force Ghost.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
Set your course for the Hoth system. There will be a substantial reward for the one who finds the Millennium Falcon. You are free to use any methods necessary, but I want them alive. No disintegration. No disintegration.
Scum and villainy, bounty hunters, Raf and Danscape are with us. How you doing, gentlemen? Raf, good to have you back with us.
Oh, superb mixing there. I like it, actually. Some old school actual intertwining of tunes. I love it.
I must admit, I cannot take credit for that. I was something I found. I thought it worked. I put some of my own little bits in there, but the main kind of thread was something I found. I won't take credit for it as much as I'd like to. Dan, how you doing, mate?
That was a banger. That was an absolute banger throughout that one. I love that. I'm not too bad. I've never had such a stressful international break. I'm so relieved it's over. All the emotion of the Gibbs-White situation, and Chris Wood gets injured, and Murillo has a not fun time. It's just, let's get back to normal football.
We will do an international duty watch on our players a bit later on. In the meantime, if you are with us in the comments, please do get involved. Let us know you're here. We always try and give shout outs if we can. And don't forget as well.
Please do go ahead and hit like and subscribe to be sure not to miss any future episodes from Talking Reds.
So it has been the international break, and Richard and I were able to catch up and do a couple of episodes of the one with. So please do go and find them if you haven't already. We did the one with Rave Football. That was a really fun, interesting watch. And also we did the one with Andrew Cove just a few days ago. So both of those are available. Please do go and find them and share alike. All right, let's get straight into it. It's FA Cup time, Richard. We travel to Brighton. What are your general thoughts going into this one, mate?
Yeah, it's one of those crazy sort of like, I really don't know what direction it would go in, because we tend to have a bit of a battle with Brighton overall. Certainly had success. I mean, a 7-0 I would think would qualify as success, but they're one of the most informed teams, and they think they've either won or drawn 8 out of the last 10 matches. We've either won or drawn 7 out of the last 10 matches. So both coming in, I think, at a good time where we're ascending. They played, decently against Man City and got a draw there. So definitely a team to be concerned about. A lot of good quality players across the pitch. So I think it's going to be a very evenly matched match. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I feel like we're gonna come in with some momentum, having beaten Man City, beaten Ipswich pretty soundly, and feeling like we've gotten back to what, like Raf said, basics and or what we're used to in terms of how we play defensively. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Good morning to Brucey. He says, good morning, gentlemen, and Raf. Oh, a little bit of a dig there from Brucey for you.
Every week, every week.
I know. Good morning, lads, says Darren. Feels like weeks since our last game. Good to get back into it. And thank you very much indeed, Sue Wayway NFFC. It says, the power of the cup is a curious thing. Make one fan cry, make another one sing. Good luck to the mighty Reds on Saturday. Hope Wood isn't out too long. Mark, thanks ever so much for your donation. You are an absolute legend, and it means a lot. Thank you very much. Raf, we beat Brighton 7-0 at the City Ground, and it wasn't that long ago. But since that game, Brighton I don't think they lost. It's almost like that kicked them up the proverbial backside. So it's quarter-final. What are you thinking about this one on first glance?
It's an interesting one. Basically, yeah, as Rich was saying, Brighton are the form team at the moment. And as much as that 7-0 did us a massive favour of restabilising us, it also gave Brighton the kick up the proverbial arse that they needed to really focus and kick on to the run that they've had of 6 wins and a draw. I think we can forget the 7-0. The only one, it's interesting if he does play on not as Hinchell would have if he's got PTSD from being the lone midfielder and just getting overrun completely and utterly or not. But I think there's an element of revenge that they will want, feeling good about themselves to go, we've got a point to prove here that we have actually flushed that out of our system. Saying that, we'll get on to why I think it'll actually be quite a cagey game. And it's not going to be the basketball game that you usually kind of envisage Brighton playing.
And Dan, we obviously are bringing players back from all over the world. Chris Wood is coming back with an injury, so looks unlikely to play anyway. Even if he had been okay to play, it's still a long way to travel. Murillo's coming back from Brazil. I think they played the early hours of this morning. But Nuno certainly showed how much he wanted to win against Ipswich with that penalty shootout and his reaction. So that says to me that, the cup for him is still a massive priority. So putting that into the mix, Nuno's desire to want to get through to a semi and the likes of Wood to miss out and maybe one or two others, how do you see this one shaping up in terms of team and formation?
Well, formation, I really don't know, because that obviously the back 5/3 that we saw in the 7-0 win throws a bit of a question mark in there as to whether or not that was the key. So formation wise, one to discuss. I think when we look at the lineups and who's available, I think selection wise he'll go as strong as he can. Whether that includes, say, Murillo because he's coming back late, maybe not. But I think if you play Milenkovic and Morato, if you go a back four, it's still going to be as strong as he can kind of go realistically in this game. I don't see him. Yeah, I don't see him, trying to manage the next two games insofar as, how quickly that Man United game comes around. I think the big question mark is obviously without Wood, who kind of comes on for the last 20 minutes if we're chasing a game, if Awoniyi's, kind of run himself into the ground and all that. I think that's obviously the big talking point and the big solution that Nuno's going to have to find. But as we go into this game, we've had 4 games without a Chris Wood goal, and we've still, got a couple of nice results in there. We scored 4 at Ipswich without Chris Wood getting involved. So there are definitely other ways to do it. It's a miss not to have him to at least come on and play 20 minutes. But on paper, we've played Brighton twice this season. There's been 11 goals, so you'd think it's going to be a very exciting end-to-end game. But then every one of our FA Cup games has not really been that, has it? It's been dragged out till the penalties. So we'll see.
In terms of the way we played against Ipswich, we talked about using Wood slightly differently, Richard, in that game and maybe one or two previous to that as well, where it felt like he was being more of a foil for the likes of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi to come into the attack more. And so if he's not going to play, as it pretty much looks like he won't, and Taiwo Awoniyi is coming in, what does that mean for the Forest front line? Taiwo is a different type of player, I think, in many ways to Chris Wood. So what do you kind of envisage that meaning for the front line? And to Dan's point as well, I mean, would it be Jota Silva then coming off the bench to be the last 15-minute man up top, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably likely. I mean, depending on, I'm sure Chris Wood will have some, very in-depth conversations with the trainers and the manager and figure out, how much can he actually commit and how much can he actually give to the club. But as you pointed out, I mean, it's better to just kind of not risk him, because even if he's not been scoring lately, he's still key to everything we do. I would say yes. I think Jota makes the most sense just because of his tendency to want to play more centrally anyway. He's decent in the air. He can do some things, even if he's not a traditional number 9, more of a false 9 sort of player. But I think having Callum's playing, which I imagine he probably will, and if you've got Elanga playing, which I imagine he probably will, I think you can sort of operate similar to what we did against Ipswich and have some success there, because both players are so effective and have been so effective now, and especially in recent form. So yeah, he kind of played more of a decoy. I mean, Taiwo is interesting because he's got he certainly hasn't had the finishing that we saw in the first season in the Premier League, but his physicality and his ability to occupy bodies and create problems and be difficult for even on a press. And there's some things that he can do that I think Wood's good at as well, but not quite in the same way. So I'd be really interested. And plus the last match that when I saw him come on, it seems like Taiwo, he looks more like himself. I mean, maybe not from a finishing standpoint, as I mentioned, but just in terms of how he can kind of like screen players out, his hold up play. He's got decent. He can be not so much touch of the Rhino all the time, although that's what it looked like most of the season. But he seemed to have more of a touch of the Panther, as you like to say, Greg, in the last match, and he had that beautiful dump off to Yates, who then shot it to Morgan, who then got it to Jota for the goal, for that 4th goal, which was critical. So I think there's a lot in him right now. I think he's out to prove something, because his status with the club moving into next season's a little bit up in the air, it seems. So he'll be eager to show something in this match, and I think he will.
Richard, I put the FOTMOB up on the screen, and it gave us the team that started against Ipswich. I've just switched Taiwo in for Chris Wood, and that leaves a back 4 of Nico and Ola Aina in the fullback roles, Eminem, Milenkovic, Murillo, Anderson, Dominguez in the midfield, and then obviously the front 4, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, Elanga, and Awoniyi. Do you think that's going to be the team? Are there any changes you'd make? I mean, Gibbs-White's going to be chomping at the bit, so I expect him to play. Dominguez and Yates is always the question now. What are you thinking? Yeah,
somewhat just based off the travel time, as we talked about, and the schedule that was associated with the match played against Argentina. I wonder if Murillo will be on the bench initially, and potentially bring Morato in for him. I I tend to lean towards Dominguez because he'll obviously had plenty of time to to rest, and they'll want to, you want to field a team that's been successful recently and has played well and played cohesively. So it seems like Dominguez would be a good option, but I'd also wouldn't be surprised if Yates ends up starting in this match. I mean, it's the classic sort of away match for Yates to come in and be that a disruptive force in the middle, because as you Raph pointed out, I highly doubt Hertzler's going to go one guy in midfield at this stage. So he clearly doesn't fancy his chances when he does that. So it seems like I'd almost be inclined to say I think this is a Yates shout in for Dominguez.
Okay, so I've switched Yates in for Dominguez in the midfield with Anderson, and Raph, are you thinking that could be the shape? Back three a possibility, do you reckon?
If we do a back three, then unless you've got Bolly that comes in, that doesn't really solve the conundrum of does Murillo play or not. For me, like Milenkovic has been away on international duty, so it's not like he and Morata have been doing lots of partnership work in the last 2 weeks, right? So that's not a factor. If Murillo had played the full 90 minutes and Brazil had done fine, then I think maybe he would have been rested and Morata comes in. The fact that he only played 45 minutes, was hooked at half-time, not by himself, 2 other players were hooked as well, just to make sure the fact that that does not linger in his mind and he gets back to a competitive game alongside his buddies, does well and flushes that from his mind for the rest of the run-in. If I was the manager, I'd play him. Doesn't matter how knackered he is, get him on the pitch from the start, get him next to Milenkovic and get him feeling better about his game straight away and purge that memory for me. So I think he's in there. If they play a back three, then you add Morata in there and then Bolly's first up to bat and maybe you take Murillo off at half-time and give him a rest and then Bolly comes in. But I just don't think he's changing stuff. Stuff's been working recently. We've got back to solidity. We'll come on to the fact that Brighton will play 2 in midfield. So I think we play 2 in midfield, and this kind of works. And if you're looking at resting players, well, Milenkovic was away. Williams was running up and down absolutely loads. Anderson was away and playing. Alanga came off the bench, scored, which was great. He didn't play huge amounts of minutes, but he was still away and traveling. Gibbs-White travelled but didn't play. So we would be second guessing everyone. I think if they come back, if they're in the right frame of mind, he just starts them all.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's travelling and there's travelling. I mean, Gibbs-White travelled to London, so hardly counts. We're on Wednesday. I think we'd expect Murillo to be back in the UK today, I'd imagine, at some point. You know, there's a bit of time still for it to be turned around. So I think I'm with you, Raph, when it comes to the back four. I think Murillo plays, especially as he only played 45 minutes. I don't think that fatigue is going to come into it. I think Nuno is going to want to go with his strongest team. Bruce in the comments says he thinks maybe we'll see Sangare, Yates and Danilo in the midfield again, like Ipswich. I mean, is that the case for you, Dan? You know, is it the cup, so therefore it's still a little bit of second string? Or is it, listen, we're 1 game away from a semi-final now, so all those kind of changes and tweaks that you get in the round 3 and 4 are out the window?
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to contradict what I said earlier, because I sort of said he won't manage the 2 games close together. But once you put it on the screen and I'm looking at the midfield, I sort of agree with what Bruce is saying in that actually we've got the bodies in midfield to rotate between these 2 games. You know, so it shouldn't be that much of a drop-off to have Sangare and Danilo potentially be the pairing in there for this game to start it. And then when you get to Man United, you've got a fully fresh Anderson who has been away on, he has played a couple of games on international duty, and you've got Dominguez fresh as well. Not that they won't, I think they'll both still play a part in the game. They might start and they might be replaced by Sangare, Danilo. It might be the other way around, but that's one area of the pitch where we can actually conserve the legs in these 2 games, isn't it? In terms of the back line, I think if Murillo's available, I do wonder whether we go for the back 3 again. I'd be interesting to see what Raf comes up with on the sort of opposition analysis in how they've set up. But when they came to the City ground, obviously they didn't put anyone in midfield, but they did throw João Pedro and Welbeck, and they've got Minter. They threw a lot of bodies that were going to be right onto our back line, which is why we needed when they were in possession, we kind of needed the back five to cover just the number of bodies they had. So it perhaps depends what Brighton do, because we've heard Nuno say it before. When the opposition's got that extra body, that's when we consider the back three. If they're only going to play the sort of lone striker, then we don't. So, there's definitely an option for the back three in this game, I think, because we're going away to their place. They're in good form. They'll want to come into it front foot, and it might just be a game to consider that. The rest, the front four doesn't really, that's I don't think that's going to be up for grabs on any of those spots. So it's just central midfield. Do we manage minutes? And the back line, do you throw that extra centre back in? And possibly do you consider Aina a rest as well, because he's had a fair bit of travelling? And do you bring Moreno into left back, Williams into right back? Is a possibility.
I mean, I'm not sure that I would do that, but it goes back to the question or the thoughts I was posing in the introduction, which is, with the now 9 games in the Premier League to go and then the FA Cup on top, we are in the business end of the season. And are we going to find Nuno having to dip into his squad a bit more than perhaps he would have wanted to? And it goes back to the January window, doesn't it? Where we all thought, well, look, if we get an injury to Taiwo or to Chris Wood, it does leave us a bit short. Thankfully, it does look as though the injury that Chris Wood has picked up seems like it's quite minor. He was speaking afterwards, and I'm sure you've all heard the clip, and it felt like he wasn't too worried, and it's just going to be managed. And maybe it's a game, maybe it's just the FA Cup game, and he's back for Man United. So I'm not too worried about Chris Wood and that injury, but it does expose us a little bit when you look at the front line, Richard, and you see Taiwo Awoniyi coming in to play up front. And then we're thinking, well, what happens if he pulls up with something? Who does slot in? Someone mentioned in the comments earlier, and I'll try and find it, but Alanga's been playing in that kind of central role quite a bit. So maybe we see Alanga switching into the middle. Is that something you'd like to see?
Yeah, it doesn't feel as natural. Doesn't feel as kind of feel like it operates with the same type of structure and balance. But yeah, I mean, I think he could do it, and his finishing lately, and granted, he's not playing that true 9 position in that sense, but his finishing has been brilliant. At least in the last match, he showed something a little bit more, I think, decisive and clinical, and so he's definitely a matchup issue. I think, not from a height standpoint. I mean, he's not going to offer a lot there, but just from a getting the ball at his feet and attacking, that middle of their back line, it's going to be problematic. But that's some pretty decent defenders. Van Heck is a really good player, so. Yeah, I don't know. My mind tends to want to kind of intuitively say no, I don't like that, but at the same time, I don't think it's an impossibility, nor won't it ever work, because he's been doing that. He's been kind of roaming. He's been sort of nomadic in terms of how he's played, and he's finding those weak points and trying to take advantage of them. So I think that could work. It just gives you a very different dynamic, right, than what we're used to. At least with Awoniyi, there's he on the spectrum of a 9. He's obviously a lot more along that spectrum where Chris Wood is, but I think it can work.
It's kind of
a different look.
If needs must, I'm just thinking if needs must. I mean, if it comes to it, and we have to kind of do a bit of tweaking around. It's also worth mentioning as well that Brighton will have had players away on international duty as well. So we're not going to be alone in that going into this game. But whilst we're thinking about the possibilities that Brighton will pose us...
I hope anybody's not stupid enough to write us off.
Time for the Talking Reds chief scout to give us the opposition report. Over to you, Raf.
It never gets old. I absolutely love that. Cool. So, what is really interesting with Brighton is when we spanked them 7-0, they kind of reset, and they have gone a bit back to what they were doing under De Zerbi, weirdly. And rather than being a very possession-based team, they've kind of moved back to sitting back and having less possession, and then hitting on the break and using their pace on their wings and everything else as well. So what we can see is these are basically the last 4 games, including the cup, I think, that was against Newcastle. And it's stable. They've basically settled on our formation that we use, which is this 4-2-3-1. The experiment of putting one in midfield and having 4 players that sit behind the striker, they're not going to replicate that. So it's not João Pedro and Danny Welbeck. It's one or the other, or potentially Ruta. So it's kind of 2 from the 3 of Ruta, João Pedro, and Webster to operate the 9, the 10 kind of spots. I would say, looking at how we have locked on Callum Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, they've got now Minter, who's really come into his own. He's got over his disciplinary issue, taken it on the chin and really knuckled down and started playing really, really well. So Mitoma and Minter are probably, again, unless they've rotated because of their international travel, this is what we're expecting from them to be on their wings. Belelba is their superstar now. This is their new £100 million player that they found. So he will start in the middle of the midfield, and it's probably Gomez that's going to pair up in the middle. Interestingly, looking at the 2 of them, they are kind of a bit box to box, but they don't really enter either one of the boxes. So they do go up to the edges of the boxes and move around, both of them, quite a lot. So there's a lot of industry and very mobile, those 2. But they do like to win the ball back, quite a lot of it. Interestingly, I don't think Dunk's going to be back. So the centre-back pairing will probably be Van Heck and Webster. Webster was much maligned, has come in, has done a job. He's no Dunk. And interestingly, I actually see Taiwo starting as a silver lining. He needs the minutes. He's not been getting them because Wood's been playing. So actually, this is really good. Taiwo gets to start and he looks quite sharp. But Taiwo against Webster is a mismatch for me. And I think that's where Taiwo, being a bully, can get some joy against Webster. He might not get as much change out of Van Heck, but he will probably get some change out of Webster. Verbruggen's going to be in goal. That's there. If we have a look at a bit of form of their front 4 and where actually the threat is, and you think about Brighton and you think about Lamptey, Estupiñán, you've got Minter and you've got Mitoma, and that's the danger, basically pushing on fullbacks, a little bit like us with Williams and Aina pushing on with the 2 wingers. That's historically what they have done. But if we look at their last 3 games, Mitoma and Minter have got no goal involvements at all. And it's Ruta and João Pedro that have got 2 each in the last 3 games. So if we go back to the last 6 games, Mitoma's got 2, Minter's got 3, Ruta's got 3, and João Pedro's got 4. So I would just say the wing play's gone a little bit off the boil in the last few games, and they've actually been hitting through the middle a lot more with where they're getting success in actual goal creation. So that's quite interesting. When it actually comes to performance, they have been winning. But again, if we have a look at SofaScore, over the season, they've only got 3 players, and that's João Pedro, Van Heck, and Belelba, that have got an average of 7 or above, to our absolute hatful of players that we've got 7+, I think it is, that we've got on average of 7. So they have been winning, but they haven't had players that have been consistently playing well, even though they're in an uptick of form. So again, it's that thing. If we do what we do, get the first goal, does that destabilize them and bring back the demons of that 7-0 again? So it is quite interesting. What I would say, though, is that Nico's going to have a big game. So if we have a look at what Ruta does, and he sits in that 10, he actually tends to drift over to double team on Minter's side, down their right, down our left. And so we will actually, and you actually see Mitoma drift a little bit more into that 10 spot, and he cuts in like Callum Hudson-Odoi does as well. So if we're going to get joy on a transition, you're actually going to find Aina's side and Elanga's side is a bit more empty to attack down, which is not the usual thing that we do down our left. So we'll probably start it down the right and then flip it over with a long kind of switch across to Callum Hudson-Odoi. But Nico's going to need help from one of the midfielders for a lot of overload onto our left-hand side in defence. So that's pretty much there. Veltman might be back, by the way. So trying to guess who's going to be their fullbacks, I don't know. Hinchelwood will be more defensive-minded over a Lamptey and a Superman, or even Veltman might come in as well. I don't really know. It depends what the balance they really want to do. But I would say, again, just to the stats-wise, they have gone to lower possession like us. And this is why I think it's going to be cagey. You look at their last, ignore Southampton, which was 50-50, against Bournemouth, against Chelsea. Both games they were at home, they had 31% possession against Chelsea and 43% possession against Bournemouth. They are not flooding forward possession based absolutely like you saw them at the beginning part of the season. They have morphed into a team more like us, and that's why it's going to be quite cagey.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, Raf. This is Talking Reds.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
And we're on the pathway to lunchtime.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
You all know by now about the Cheese Trader and the 10% off. If you're not sure, all the details are in the bio to this episode. Please do us a favor and hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. We are, as ever, trying to push our numbers up. Okay, I want to mention as well that we lifted a trophy on Saturday. The Forest women beat Stoke 3-1 to lift the National League Cup. There was a Charlie Wellings brace and a late goal on from Mel Johnson. And Charlie Welling's second goal actually was an absolute rocket. Top bins, really good. So thrilling stuff. Really, really great to see our women's team lifting that trophy that they won a couple of seasons ago, in fact. There was a round of fixtures in their division. Forest women are still top. I think they play Hull this weekend, and they beat them away in the reverse fixture. So it's looking good. I think there's about 4 games left in that division. Only one gets promoted. Forest women are looking definite odds on, fingers crossed, touch wood, that sole promotion place will be theirs.
Yeah, Greg, Wolves won, so they closed the gap to 2, but we've still got a game in hand over them.
That's right, indeed. The gap's 2, but we've got the game in hand. We're thinking about FA Cup. We're thinking about Brighton, and we've had our fabulous Oppo report from our chief scout. I think it's time for a little bit of a technical analysis now.
I'm a stat man.
Moraes fazendo som, Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, e Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som.
Resident statsman Dan Scape has been a busy boy over the international break. I think he published this, he published that. So if you like your stats, then Dan, you can tell us about where you can find the stuff that you were writing about at some point in this episode. But for now, we're focusing on this weekend and Brighton. And what have you come up with for us this time?
Yeah, just a simple form chart. This is what we all know, I suppose, is that since that 7-0 win that I've carefully marked on the chart there, I marked that a few times to celebrate it. Their form, this is form over 8-game period, basically. So up until that point, they were improving their form. You can see that the black line had started to sort of go up a bit. Then we hammered them 7-0 and it's shot up. And that's kind of the form that they've been in, is the best that they've been in this whole season so far. But it's kind of leveled off a little bit because obviously they drew the last game. And you can kind of see our form went the exact opposite to theirs in the red line, in that we were kind of on that trajectory up where we were winning back-to-back games. And then we've sort of dipped off, obviously, with the difficult games we've had, but we've now turned the corner a little bit. And we're picking back up, hopefully, to where we've been all season, that kind of average of just under 2 points a game that we've been picking up. So that was just to demonstrate quite how dramatic their form changed.
And coming into this fixture, it's nice to see the red line is on the upward turn and the Brighton line is slightly on the downward turn. So a good time to play them, perhaps. Next one.
And this was just one of the. I mean, quite a bit of their charts stood out. Like we've touched on, they've slightly changed their style of play to be a little bit more direct. If you look at things like how many passes they have on per shot and per goal and things, they've gone a little bit more direct. I think the only thing with the possession stats is because they've been winning games, you sort of naturally have less possession when you're winning anyway, because the opposition chases you down. So it's sort of chicken and egg as to whether it's the lack of possession that's doing it or just because you're taking chances and things. But one thing that did stand out is on the defensive side. This is showing on the left the shots on target that the teams have faced, just in terms of the number of shots on target, and on the right the chance quality of those shots. So you want both these lines to be going down. You want your opponents to have less shots, and you want the quality of those shots to be less. And you can actually see it over the course of the season. Again, the black line is Brighton and the red line is Forest on both the charts. You can kind of see over the course of the season, Brighton have been getting better defensively in terms of they've gone to where we kind of were in terms of restricting teams to take as many shots on target, and also the quality of those chances has also been coming down. So the straight line is kind of the simple trend over the season, and the wiggly line is kind of the 8-game average. So you can see on the left, the black line is going straight down. On the right, again, it's actually peaked up a little bit over these last 3 or 4 games. Like they have been allowing slightly better chances than they were for the opposition. So there's a little bit of hope there in it as well. And mainly what you can see on the red line is that we were suddenly, since that Bournemouth game, in terms of the number of shots, we were rapidly going the wrong way. Our wiggly line was going up, so to speak, and all of a sudden we've kind of stopped that momentum. We've kind of turned it round against Arsenal, Man City, Ipswich, whereby we're not allowing as easily for teams to get shots against us. And on the chance quality chart, the same pattern as well. So we are trending back to where we've been this whole season, which is a good sign.
Excellent. You've given us a look at the all-time Premier League table, which is an interesting one. What have you found for us?
So this is the secret war with Brighton that perhaps hasn't been picked up on. So in the Premier League, and I know this is a cup game, but in the Premier League, we have now just gone 1 point above Brighton in the all-time Premier League table there with 367 points. This excludes the point deduction. If you put that in, we'd be below them, but we pretend that never happened. And Brighton have got 366 points. We've got 367. There's no one else in the realms of competing with us or us with them this season. So it's just us and Brighton that can kind of finish above each other. They have done it in slightly less games, which is in their favour. But then if you look across the chart as well to the goals scored, both teams have scored exactly 365 goals in the Premier League since they've been in all their Premier League games. So we're neck and neck on that as well. And if you skip onto the charts that go with this, then we can see. So this is the points chart. So this is kind of when we got promoted, the overall points we had in the red line was a fair way above Brighton, but because we were struggling down the bottom and they kind of improved to be a solid top half team, you see their blue line went above us for kind of halfway through. Well, I suppose the start of our second season back in the Premier League. They went above us, and then this season on the right, you can just see that's when we've turned it around and caught back up to them. So there's a nice little cat and mouse battle going on there in the graphs, which everyone loves to see. And then that's just focusing in on this season, just to show where the beautiful poetic part about this is where the 7-0 win came, is the point where we went above them in terms of the points that we'd actually won. So that 7-0 win put us above Brighton in that all-time Premier League table for the first time in a while, and then we've snuck above them again now. That's that one. And there was I thought, is there one with the goals on or not?
No.
Okay. Well, the goals one again is interesting because, like I say, 365 goals for both teams, and the point whereby we went above them on goals was that 7-0 win. So it's almost like the players knew that there was this mini league table in the background competing with Brighton, and they thought we need to put 7 past them so that we can get level on goals with them. And that's where we are. So we are following the Brighton model in all ways.
If it does feel like there's a bit of synergy with Brighton and Forest. because they're the ones that people have looked to try and do the kind of transfers like Brighton, the Brighton model and that kind of stuff. They've been a well-run club since they came up. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, Brighton were a top-flight side, FA Cup final against Man United that they lost, I think, 85, then relegated, massive issues with their ground and not having a place to play and all that kind of stuff. You know, so they've been through the mill, and then to get back into the Premier League and stay there, they're one of the teams that have achieved that really difficult feat of getting up and staying up. And one thing I wanted for Forest, and I'm sure everyone listening and you guys are the same, was getting up after 23 years was unbelievable, but staying up has been completely crucial. You look at the likes of Sheffield United and Burnley, Fulham for a period as well of that yo-yoing. Norwich did a lot of yo-yoing as well, and it just kind of demonstrates how difficult it is to stay in the top flight. And I think it's become more and more difficult. So to see us in a all-time Premier League table, as you've shown, in not a so bad position after having so many years out of the top flight is quite good. It's quite interesting to see Wimbledon, who haven't been in existence for about 20 years, are still above us. That's interesting, and so on. But Derby are below us in the all-time Premier League table as well. So that's a good thing. Okay, right. We've got a bit of time to move on the chat away from the FA Cup just for the moment. We'll circle back to that before we finish off. But also want to rightly point out, Dr. Anna's with us. She says that the Forest netball girls had a great result at this weekend. They won their first home game 70-54 against Cardiff Dragons. Yes, indeed. And Paul Mordy rightly corrects me that it was 83 that Man United beat Brighton in the FA Cup final. Okay, right. International duty for some of our players. I'm going to come to Richard for a particular player, and we know who that's going to be. I'll come to Raf from Murillo in a minute. You can take us through like a little bit of a Murillo watch. We haven't got too much time per player because I want to kind of move things along. So let's keep this concise. And then Dan and I, we can like chew the fat on Milenkovic and Alanga and the others. So Morga Gibbs-White, we know that he was left out of the squad, that he got called up because Cole Palmer was injured, that he was left out of the first game altogether. No big surprise. But Thomas Tuchel has said some really nice things about him, Richard, and his attitude and how, you know, he was really impressed with him as a winner. He'd won with underage groups and so on. And so he was pulled back into the squad for the second game. And we all thought, he's going to have to get some minutes, surely. But then there were no minutes. And Richard, you almost had an internal combustion down WhatsApp at me the other night, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I had a full-on adult tantrum about it, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it because, frankly, I just think it doesn't make any sense to me, and it continues to be a bit baffling to me where his headspace is as it relates to Tuchel. Because, I mean, I understand it's only 2 matches in. They've won both matches. You know, they've retained a considerable amount of possession, not looked too exciting in the process. Which isn't everything, right? Aesthetics in terms of football isn't everything. Forrest understands that very well. We play a style of football that not everybody loves, but I just don't quite comprehend what's missing in terms of Tuchel's assessment of him. By all means, and all accounts, you know, you've seen plenty of pundits talking about his initial exclusion from the squad, which they thought was baffling, given his form. And Raf talked very eloquently about that, I think, recently in terms of his goal contributions, and so forth, and just kind of looking at it from a metrics perspective as hard in terms of where he is in terms of form compared to the other players. And I still will just continue to be a little bit. We'll just say irate on why we have Jordan Henderson in relation to Morga Gibbs-White's age and his progression and where he fits and just the multiplicity of ways that he can play and how he can be utilized in a sort of Swiss Army knife fashion. I just think it gives him a lot more value, and for some reason that's not even registering with Tuchel. So I personally think he's yes, I did, as Greg pointed out, I said it almost comes across as an FU to Morgan, because if you can't get in against Latvia, I don't really understand when you're going to get in. So it just seems a bit perplexing. I don't know how else to articulate it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
and yes, of course, he's my favorite player, so I'm going to be a little bit of a homer and a bit biased, but it just seems as though he's not really. It's just not registering with Tuchel as to his value.
there was a Forest caller on TalkSport with Cundy and O'Hara, and he was saying pretty much a similar kind of things. And the one thing that they were saying is, well, it's not charity. Got to earn your income. I'm thinking, well, look, if you can't look at the players in an international against Latvia and Andorra, then when are you going to look at them? Because a lot of the friendlies have been taken out of the equation now of the Nations League. And when you know about Kyle Walker, I mean, do you really need to change the right back? I mean, Reece James played the full match. Do you really need to change Lewis Skelly and put Walker on for him? No, you don't. You don't need to bring Walker on. What do we need to learn about Walker? What do we need to learn about Jordan Henderson? I don't even know why he's in the squad in the first place. What do we need to learn about Phil Foden apart from the fact that he's shit for England? He doesn't turn up for England. And ultimately, it's just another wasted substitution. So I was cross as well, but not that surprised. I mean, he's going to have to bide his time. And hopefully we will see in the June game, when obviously it's at the City ground, whether that brings with it an added kind of amount of pressure, or I don't know if it does or not. Maybe it doesn't. Should he be included or not? I'd like to think that he will be included, but if everyone's fit, does he get picked? There was such a massive hoo-ha about him not getting selected, not just from Forest fans, from many, many pundits alike. And one more thing, Richard, that's come out in the last sort of 24 hours. I didn't get a chance to read the article properly because it was behind a paywall, but the gist of it is that apparently Tuchel has hinted or indicated or suggested or, subliminally sent over what he's thinking to certain players that if you want to get in my World Cup squad, you're going to have to leave your current club in the summer to go to play for a bigger club. So are you worried that Morgan might think, shit, I need to be out of here?
No.
I've got to get out of here.
No, because I think he's going to see right through that and see how ridiculous that is. Because invariably what that means is that he doesn't even evaluate players based off of their actual merits on the pitch. He bases it off of who they're associated with. I mean, is that the right way to manage a football club in terms of
if that is the way that he's doing it, and Morgan says, well, if that's the way he's doing it, I'm going to have to go and play for Man United. Because Man United
I wouldn't choose them.
Well,
I wouldn't either.
They are quintessentially one of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yeah.
Look, the Morgan Gibbs-White debate, we'll rave on and on. We love him. We know that. I'm going to move on, Richard, and let you kind of like decompress a little bit. Come to Raf. Murillo, first cap for Brazil, didn't quite go according to plan.
No, not at all. What I would also say is I'll debunk whatever that rumour and clickbait kind of quote was, because you've got players from Everton, West Ham, Villa, Newcastle. They're all in the England side, all being picked and all getting on the pitch. So it's tosh, whoever said that. Yeah. Anyway, so to get to Murillo, it was a really proud dad moment of actually seeing him puffing his chest out, which is already freaking huge anyway, to start off with, and singing along to the Brazil anthem. It was absolutely wonderful. He got his first cap. It was brilliant. Punchy debut in a seriously aggressive Argentinian bowl of basically the grudge match internationally. And it's like the equivalency of getting your first England cap, playing up in Scotland if Scotland had won the World Cup the last two times, basically. And it's that type of environment that he was being thrust into. He started off first 2 minutes really, really well. Argentina kicked off. They pinged it around for 2 minutes. Brazil couldn't touch the ball. He was the one that stepped out of defense, nicked the ball back, got it, passed it out. Really good start. It then went downhill rapidly. And in the first half, they conceded 3 goals, of which Murillo was involved in all 3 of them to some degree. And there's a lot of debate that's been happening on X. I don't hold him at fault, really, for any one of the 3. And Brazil were basically shambolic. Their midfield was non-existent and their fullbacks were not offering very much protection at all. For the first goal, we saw this last season. You have a fullback comes in, ball cannons around, it cannons off of him into the line of the striker, and the striker puts it in the net. He doesn't know too much about it, and that's the fullback causing that issue. He could have been stronger in the challenge. Second one, fullback doesn't cut out the cross comes in across the 6-yard box. He can't leave it, so he tries to get something on it. It deflects off of him and it goes towards a striker, and the striker puts it in the net. Again, is it really his fault? The third one, he's getting a lot of heat. It's actually Joe Linton's fault. He was marking someone else. McAllister runs through midfield. Joe Linton's marking him. He drops him. Murillo's trying to then mark two players that are going opposite directions. What is he supposed to do? McAllister goes through and scores effectively when he has to change 180 degrees, try and then go back to him, tries to put him off and doesn't quite. And also the keeper should do better in that situation as well. But he got hooked at half-time. Two other players, including Joe Linton, did do. So it's a bit of a baptism of fire. He needs to come back. He needs some love from his teammates. I think he's strong enough mentally to get over it. But I do worry, given the fact that it was only Gabriel being suspended and you've got Marquinhos as well, of like, you're not going to displace either of those two. I don't know if he gets another cap anytime soon, but that probably means he stays with us for a bit longer, probably next season while this is happening. So
well, it was his third call up. And so he's been getting called up and hopefully he'll continue to get the call ups. And they understand he's still, 21, 22? So he's still young. So I think
he didn't get a chance to do
exactly.
any of his massive pinging passes, not a single one.
And it's Argentina, and it's a baptism of fire. So, look, he's got a cap. First ever Forest player, I think, to get a cap for Brazil, which is magnificent.
It's awesome. He's coming back here. It's the type of club you come back and you'll forget it because we're really tight knit. It won't affect him. I hope not, and that's why I think he starts against Brighton just to flush that memory out of his mind.
Dan Scape, did you manage to catch any of the matches involving the likes of Milenkovic or Elanga?
Not really, no. I saw what happened in terms of what they did, but I didn't see any of the actual action. I saw some of Isak's goals. Like one of his was a bit of a crazy, or his assist where he took on about 10 players. But no, I know Elanga got a goal, and he'll be just delighted when he to be back in that Sweden setup. He got whatever 80 odd minutes on the pitch. And Milenkovic, the opposite end of his career to Murillo, just turns up and does what he does, keeps the clean sheet.
Well, you say opposite end. He's only 27. He's not like he's an old man.
Well, yeah, you know, he's got that bit of experience at international.
I mean, he missed the first game because he was suspended. He played the second. They won 2-0. I mean, he's just so important. I was impressed with Nico Williams. I mean, I know that Wales made hard work of it, especially last night. They looked like they were going to lose, but Nico's showing he's playing on the left. I think he was popping up on the right. For me, Nico Williams has gone under the radar as to how much of a good season he's had because the other players are all getting big plaudits, especially Ola Aina. But I absolutely do not think we need to sign a starting left back now. We have got a starting left back. Nico Williams is that man. You know, we need good cover. And Nico has come on and come on and come on. So thrilled for him to see him doing well. And we know Elliot Anderson is on the cusp of the main squad, but so I mean under 21 minutes for him, as well as one or two others. Ola Aina was on duty with Nigeria. He set up Lookman, I think, for a lovely header. So you know our players, and there are plenty of our players now out away on international duty, and you know as much as we want our players to play, we also want them to come back unscathed. And obviously, we touched on Chris Wood already a few times. It doesn't look like it's that serious. Fingers crossed that it's not. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Quickly, Greg. Nico, for Wales, like he's amassed an insane amount of caps already. He's basically first on the team sheet for Wales. If he can stay injury-free, he might become the most capped player for Wales in their history.
It's completely possible. I think Chris Gunter was there most capped as well, wasn't he? Another ex-Forest fullback.
It's unbelievable. I love Nico.
So he's got 46. I'm looking at. He's got 46 caps.
What happened to Ryan Giggs? He must have been distracted, not playing enough.
Was Ryan Giggs Welsh? I can't remember.
Yeah, he was. But it was also at a stage where I don't think they were doing very much on the international stage, like going far in competitions and other bits and pieces.
Yeah, I always remember as a kid they had Ian Rush, they had Mark Hughes. They had Giggs, they had Saunders, they had proper Neville Southwood. They had really good players, but it's never managed to do anything really. So, any Welshies listening, we're very pleased for Nico. It's always interesting when I look in the chat and you see Derby fans popping up with random. Thanks for joining us. Any Derby fans that want to pop into our chat, and you don't stand out that much when you start making silly comments too much, but you're welcome. Happy for you to be here. Right. We're going to round things off, Richard. We are going to talk about potential incomings to the City ground. And the name that come up and maybe disappeared just as quickly as it did was Gyökeres or however we say it. Forest, obviously going to the Champions League, are going to want to sign one or two stellar signings. I think Gyökeres might well come to Forest. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're never going to sign Gyökeres." Why not? Why can't we sign Gyökeres? What's wrong with that, Richard?
Part of me says that I think what we're doing is we're just shifting all of our potential available funds into one and funneling it into one position. And that just makes it very difficult because, as we've ascertained, there's questions around Sosa as to whether he's really a Premier League player. I mean, maybe he's a decent depth player, but he's not going to provide, I think, at this stage of his career, he doesn't seem to be favored and certainly doesn't seem to have done enough to garner staying with the club. There's still, jury's out a little bit on Jota still. I think he's a little bit more adapted a little bit better there. Yeah, and we've got some midfield challenges. Even though we've got some decent depth, we have to start to question, is all of what we have on our squad beyond the first 11 really going to put us into a stratosphere that we know exists for those teams we're going to face in a Champions League arena? So I think it's to me, it feels a little bit too much putting all your eggs in one basket kind of scenario. And I'd like to see us find something a little bit different in terms of, plus, I think Dan pointed this out, so forgive me, Dan, for stealing your thunder in any way. He's at a decent age. Obviously, he's 26. He'll be 27 next season. He's hitting that first big contract for him. So we're catching him at a time where you don't really want to be, because you're not going to get potentially not going to get any value out of him after that. So if you're trying to do a Brighton model sort of mode, you're not really going to get that with Gyökeres. What you could look at, and as Dan and I have talked about this guy quite often, Emmanuel Amiga from Strasbourg is more kind of what you're looking for. He is a little bit tidier on the ball. He's a little bit different type of striker than Chris Wood, but length. We've got length. There we go, Greg. There's your innuendo that you wanted to throw in today. He strikes me as, and he's 22 years old. He looks like he's on the cusp of being potentially a Dutch international. So I think he's got this opportunity to be one of those players that we catch at the right time, that we can essentially at some point in the future flip for really good money, because he's a very effective striker. And like I said, stylistically, he's a bit of a departure from what we've seen from Chris Wood. So it gives you a different look. I've seen a lot of people talking about Cunha. Brilliant goal again last night, but maybe Nuno's the kind of guy who can get him to the right temperament, but he just feels like a powder keg to me, and he's going to cost a lot of money as well. And
the big man is going to want a stellar signing.
I get it.
Listen,
but they've been so careful about what they've done.
Or someone like that. He ain't signing no guy we've never heard of from Strasbourg, mate. It ain't happening. It's not happening,
and that's fine. I guess we'll see how that plays out.
You can't be spending 60 million quid on one player.
Why?
Yes, we've got Champions League money, but so he's going to be on crazy wages. You're 60 million pound player, and again, we get Champions League this year. Look at the problems Newcastle and Villa had, right? We're not going straight back into Champions League next year. It's not happening. And we're not winning the Champions League next year. So that means the fact that money we've got for 1 year and it's gone. So that money's got to last the length of the contracts that we're putting these people on. You buy Gyökeres for 60 million. Amortize that, say, over 4 years, just for the math's sake, to make it easier. Okay, so that's 15 million quid a year that you're taking, plus agency fees, plus signing bonuses. He's going to want a massive whack. So add that to about 18 million quid a year, plus his wages, which are going to be in the realms of about 10 million quid a year, or something crazy that you're going to have to pay him. Bonkers, or probably not. Well, I don't know. Like at least another 5. So then you're talking up to near about 25 million quid a year just to service that one player. You're getting 80 million quid over 3 years. You've already spent all your Champions League money on that one player, and we need 1 or 2 fullbacks. We need a 6. Probably have to sell Sangare. We need 1 or 2 wingers. We need probably another striker. We need some development players as well. You're not spending 60 million quid on one player.
We're not. I was going to say, I don't think we're reinventing the wheel, though. We can look at other clubs for examples of, there's different ways of doing it, isn't there? Brighton is one way of doing it, whereby they would never go out and spend 60 million quid on a striker, I don't think. They might spend 30. They might still invest a good amount of money, but not like 60. But then you can look at Newcastle, who spent like 50 million on Isak. And it has sort of worked for them, but it has also restricted them in other areas where they've not been able to invest, because they did spend all their money, early on, and they're as ambitious as us. There's no difference between them and us in terms of ambition, but they got Isak. We would love to have Isak, but it also then restricted them in other areas being able to spend, and they still had to be smart. So it's possible you could do that, but then you will have to kind of live with what you've got in other areas of the pitch. And interesting to see, because I do agree. There's a good chance Marinakis will want that stellar highlight.
I think, especially when you see, look, I know that media talk and so-called links are what make the newspapers and the other things in the media sell. I get that, right? And you don't believe everything you read. A lot of it's agent talk put in there by different people. You take it all with a pinch of salt. There's a long way to go between now and the end of the season, and there's a long way to go between now and the start of next season when the window closed. There's so many twists and turns happening, but at the same time, there's going to be elements of truth in some of it. So Douglas Luiz is another player that they went for in the January window to a certain degree. His name is popping back up again, and he could well be that midfield player that you guys were touching on a moment ago that we need. I think Sangare is out the door. I really, really think Sangare is out the door. I think he's going to Saudi or he's going somewhere else. And there's going to be one or two others that are out the door as well. Well, however,
they 22 to not make a loss, basically.
You need to do a little bit of wheeling and dealing. I hate using that phrase, but it's true. And last season we saw the dark arts of PSR collaborations between clubs when it comes to moving money to clubs and making it work on the spreadsheet, on the balance sheet. And I think we're going to see more of that again. Clubs are now getting wise to what they need to do to scratch each other's backs. And whilst we benefited from Elliot Anderson coming to Forest, Newcastle, we don't want to sell him. We think a lot of him, but he was an asset. So those kind of assets are going to start doing the rounds again, I believe. Look, we're going to do more transfer stuff in the summer when there's not much else to talk about. All we'll be talking about is who we're going to sign, Why haven't we signed anybody? Oh my God, all that kind of stuff. So we've got all that to look forward to. Right, we've come to the end of this particular episode, but not before we quickly do this, because Danscape did put together a 1996 FA Cup quarter final. What is it? Kind of teams?
Yeah, the lineups between Forest and Villa. Villa won this game 1-0 on that. It was obviously the 96 season under Frank Clark. So some good names in the team there. Chris Bart-Williams at centre-back is an interesting one, in particular. But the idea of this was just to see whether you guys could guess some of the names I've blanked out there. There's 5 names blanked out from the
Steve
two
Stone,
lineups.
David Phillips, right?
Hold on. And also guess what links them. So if you work out what the thing in common is that they've got, you'll probably get some of the names.
So just for those that are watching, there's one player blanked out from the Forest side who wore number 7 on the right-hand side of midfield. And on the Aston Villa team, there were 4 players blanked out. The number 10 in the middle of midfield, the left back, the right back, and the third centre-back. So let's kind of put a bit of order on this, because Richard and Raf are chomping at the bit here. Slow down. Right, well, let's look at the Forest player first then. So, Raf, you have a guess? See, who's that Forest number 7?
I thought that was Steve Stone.
You're going to say Steve Stone. Was it Steve Stone? Was that right?
That is correct, yeah. So, yeah, no, Steve Stone in there on the right wing. So that's your introduction. So now you've got him. If you could work out something about his
forestry related, like stone, river.
No.
Oh,
not that creative.
Let's look at the Villa. Is one of those fullbacks? Was it Alan Wright?
Correct.
With a left back, Alan Wright.
Yeah, Alan so Wright. He was playing for Villa then in '96, and then when did he join Forest? All the way in. Hang on.
Later on, wasn't it?
It was later on. He played 11 games for us, didn't he? The most horrendous season going, I think, in my memory.
Richard, have you got a stab in the dark at any of those Villa players? Can you think of any of them?
No idea.
This is the day when there was no internet and Richard was stranded in America, clinging on to an American football, thinking that's where life started and ended.
Accurate.
Paul Morley's shout is, "Are they all bald?" Which is a very good shout considering the first 2 that you've guessed. I wish I'd thought of that, but it's not that.
Is the link that they all played for Forest and Villa?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So yeah, so that must mean then that Alan Hutton is in there. Is that right?
No. Before his time, I would think.
Before his time. Gary Charles.
Correct. Yes. Right back for Villa.
Great.
Right back for Villa. Yeah, I remember we went to Villa eventually. So we got Vicky Shimmiker.
Correct. That's the other centre back. Yeah.
For a Steve with that one.
96.
So we're looking for the number 10 in the midfield for Villa, who played for both Forest. Oh, that must be Dean Saunders then.
No.
Oh,
No.
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 Oh,
Not Dean Saunders.
not Dean Saunders. So
He would have played under Cloughie, I'm pretty sure.
would have played under Cloughie. Villa under Hodge? No, it's too late for Hodge. Too late for. He was at Villa, but it was too late for Hodge.
90. So he played for Forest in 91, 92, I think.
How long was he at Forest for? One season.
Jemson? No, he was a forward,
no.
right?
Was he?
130 games for Forest in the first division.
Was he at Forest before Villa?
Yes.
Forest before Villa.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary Parker.
No. Tell me if you want to be put in misery.
Well, silence doesn't do anything to a podcast, so you're gonna have to give us the first. Give us the first name.
The first name we'll give it away straight away. Franz.
Oh, Franz Carr.
Franz Carr, yeah.
Franz Carr
was playing in just behind the front two for Villa on that day in '96. So there's some real generational crossovers there. Yeah. Alan Wright, Shimmiker playing in the same team as Pierce, Little, and all that.
Franz Carr was the first footballer who was the fastest footballer in the world, and that guy could run. I mean, he was like a speed merchant. Loved a bit of Franz Carr. All right, guys, we're at time. We've gone over into added time as we usually do. Raf, thanks ever so much for being with us as ever. Very, very quick closing thoughts.
Oh, nothing at all. So glad to be back to football. Just prayers and thoughts with Wood. Nothing an injection can't fix just to get him through to the end of the season if needs be. But Taiwo has been our saviour before. Here comes the second coming of Taiwo. Here we go.
Indeed. Danscape, thanks for putting that together at the end. That was a nice way to round things off. Any closing thoughts for us?
No, just excited for the game. I'm still, as excited about this little FA Cup run as the league position and everything we've got to go for there. So I would absolutely love it if we can get past them and get that little Wembley trip in the books, I think.
Indeed. And my compadre, my partner in crime, my brother from another mother in Oklahoma, Richard Spray. Final thoughts, mate?
Not much to say other than this. For those not at home, you'll have to go back and try to watch it for once. But little fingers in the ears moment, in solidarity with my buddy Morga Gibbs-White.
I've never seen you so angry. I think you're still smarting this week. But it has still been a successful weekend because, as I mentioned earlier, Nottingham Forest women lifted some silverware for the club. And seeing the girls looking so happy, so delighted, so thrilled, and well-deservedly lifting up that trophy just made me want more and more success for Forest. And the men's team going into the FA Cup quarterfinals this Saturday with everything to play for. It just might be our season when the men are also lifting up a trophy. So get behind the lads, get behind the girls. More silverware on its way to the City Ground. Let's hope so.
Join Greg and Richard right